Hello boys and girls, welcome to Mrs. Bandu's Math Movies. In this lesson 3-2 for course 2, we are going to be adding and subtracting fractions. And so those are our, that's actually our objective, to add and subtract fractions and solve problems involving fractions. Okay, so first of all, let's look at a couple of examples with models of what we're trying to do here. You can use models to add or subtract fractions with different denominators. The models below show that 1/4, which is this model right here, you have 4 pieces, one piece of which is shaded in to represent the 1/4, plus 1/3. This model has 3 pieces, one of those 3 shaded in, is equal to 7/12. Because when you would put them together and combine them, you would actually have to cut it into 12 so that you could split this up into equal pieces that would fit both inside this fraction bar, and finally inside this fraction bar as well. If you'll count, and on your paper it'll be easier to see probably than on the computer screen, there are 7 of the 12 pieces here shaded, so 7/12. Also remember that earlier this year we talked about a least common denominator. The least common denominator of 4 and 3 is in fact 12. Okay, this is a visual representation of how that least common denominator comes into play. Okay, similarly with subtraction, we have 1/2 minus 1/3. Our top bar represents 1/2. The second bar represents 1/3. When I subtract them, I see that I'm left with 1/6. When I have to cut the halves and the thirds into equal pieces that would fit within those bars, it would be 6 as the least common denominator. So again, this is a visual representation of using least common denominator. And we see that one of the 6 equal pieces is shaded, so 1/2 minus 1/3 is 1/6. Okay. All right. Let's look here. Number 1, common denominators. We want to find 2/7 plus 3/7. Okay, first off, we'll do an estimate here. 2/7, because both of these fractions are less than 1, we'll use our benchmarks. 2/7 is about closer to 0. 3/7 is almost 1/2. So my benchmarks are 0 plus 1/2, which equal 1/2. All right. Now, since they have a common denominator already, I can go ahead and add them because we're talking about the same number of pieces for each bar or each model that we might have. So we're going to keep the denominator the same as 7. We never add denominators. You might want to add that little note, and we probably will add it in class if we to remind you. And then I simply add my numerator. So 2 plus 3 is 5. My denominator is 7. So my answer is 5/7. That is fairly close to my estimate of 1/2. So that means chances are that I'm right or very close to right. Remember, estimates are helpful to determine whether you're in the ballpark. They're not going to tell you if you're exactly right or not, usually. Okay, number 2. When we have different denominators, we have 5/9 plus 1/6. Let's do our estimate first. 5/9 is very close to the benchmark of 1/2, and 1/6, is very close to 0. So again, your book writes the word or in there. I kind of wish they would just put equals 1/2. Okay, now I need to find the least common denominator for 9 and 6. So remember, that's the smallest number that I can divide by 9 and also by 6. That is going to give me 18 for my least common denominator. And then from there, just like we did in the previous chapter, we will write our equivalent fractions. So I'm going to fill in my denominators here because then it's done. Okay. Remember, start from the bottom. What do you do to 9 to get 18? 9 times 2 gives me 18. 5 times 2 would then give me 10. Here, 6 times 3 is 18. So 1 times 3 is 3. You're going to then add, because it's an addition problem, 10 plus 13. Oh, excuse me, 10 plus 3 is 13. Got ahead of myself there. And remember, we keep the denominator the same, 13/18. Also, we always want to check if we can simplify. In this case, 13 is prime and does not go into 18, so this is in simplest form. So 5/9 plus 1/6 is equal to 13/18. All right, we will go on to the next question. A carpenter begins with a board that is 3/4 of an inch thick. She removes 1/16 of an inch from its thickness. How thick is the board now? Okay. In this case, the authors of your book did not go with the strictness of using the benchmarks, but rather they thought of, let's leave 3/4 at 3/4, and 1/16 is so very small, we'll just call that the 0. We didn't really use a benchmark on this, but did on that. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you kind of mix things that we do. If in doubt, you could use your benchmarks though. Okay. All right, so here I'm subtracting 3/4 minus 1/16. The least common denominator of 4 and 16 is 16. What I always do is I always check to see if the smaller denominator goes into the larger one. 4 goes into 16. That way I know that my larger denominator will be my common denominator. Makes my life a little bit easier so that you don't end up with very large numbers, because the larger the numbers get, people tend to make more and more mistakes with them. So try to find that, keep them as small as possible. Okay, so again, 4 times 4 is 16. 3 times 4 is 12. So that gives me 12/16. Minus 1/16. Don't even really need to write this here. I'm just filling in the boxes because they're given to me. But 1/16 is already 1/16, so I don't have to do anything. And then 12 minus 1 is 11/16. So the board is now 11/16 of an inch thick. And then again, check for reasonableness. 11/16 is very close to the estimate of 3/4. So my answer is reasonable. All right, you have 1, 2, 3 quick check numbers, some with multiple parts. Please complete these. Bring any questions you might have after reviewing this. Bring them to class, and certainly we will do our best to answer them. I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye now.